GEM International is a new diamond explorer in the richest diamond producing country in Africa, located next to the fourth largest producing diamond mine in the world. International Spotlight is on an 1109 carat diamond recently discovered in Africa by a fellow Canadian junior with a proven operator and finance team. GEM International trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol GI. Visit us at gemdiamondmining.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Jordan Bateman, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Welcome back to the show, Jordan.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
The topic you wanted to talk about is our medical services premiums that we pay in BC. I don't know what, 120, 130 bucks a couple. I don't know what a family pays here, but it's not rated on your income, is it?
No, I can tell you that for my family, it's about $150 a month for MSP tax, and that's a bill that comes every single month, and that we have to find a way to pay. The MSP system is very complex. It's collected separately from income taxes, which makes it unique in Canada. For some people who are lucky enough to have employers pay it, that's about half of the people who pay MSP get it through their employer. Their employer pays it through payroll deductions. The other half pay it out as a regular bill. So it's one of those systems that have gotten more and more complex. That frankly, the BC Liberals have dug themselves into a major hole because they've they've increased it every single year that they've been in power. With the exception of the coming year where they've already announced that they're going to hold the line. But in the past 5 years, it's gone up 40%. It's become a major bill for most families.
Wow, 40%. I guess a lot of people haven't done the calculation, but what else has gone up 40% in the last 5 years?
Well, not our incomes, that's for sure, and that's the big problem here. So we've been beating the drum on this issue for quite a while, and the NDP and Green Party picked up on it in the last year or two. The Green Party especially used it as a big petition push, which of course is a way for them to generate potential supporters for the election. But nonetheless, I think they collected something like 50 or 60,000 signatures on a petition against the MSP. And now at the BC Liberal Convention, and this is really heartening for someone like me who's been, pushing these issues with the Liberals for a long time, the membership of the BC Liberals at this recent convention voted that they too want to scrap the MSP system. And I think that adds a little bit more pressure to the Premier and Cabinet to finally get something done on this issue, especially when they're going into an election where there isn't really a major issue yet, and MSP very well could become that.
Well, it doesn't really seem to be fair. Somebody making minimum wage pays the same for their health care as a billionaire like Jimmy Pattison.
Yeah, so the threshold has changed over the last year or two. The Liberals have tried to tweak it a bit. It used to be that if you made $30,000 or $3 million, you paid the same. Now it's about $45,000. So if you make $45,000, you pay the same for your MSP as Jimmy Pattison or as Henrik Sedin or any of the very well-off people that you can think of. Yeah, that obviously I think violates a key tenet of fairness as far as ability to pay. It certainly makes it a regressive tax, which is one of the points of agreement that we have with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. CTF and CCPA don't normally agree on stuff, but on the MSP, we both agree that there need to be major changes. Where we disagree is on what those changes should be.
Well, what kind of change would you like to see?
Well, first let's talk about what the parties are proposing, because it's kind of interesting.
Okay.
So the Green Party is proposing essentially an Ontario system where there is a line on your tax return, and if you do not have an employer who pays your MSP, then you are taxed according to your usual income tax rate, and you pay a little bit more through that. So that's one way of doing it. The NDP want to get rid of the MSP and roll it into the income tax system completely. Where they're having problems is, what do they do about people who haven't negotiated as part of their contracts? So this, of course, especially a sensitive issue for the NDP, which relies on so many labor unions to support them. The last thing they want to do is go to their core supporters and make them feel like they're losing a benefit that could happen. possible solution to that is actually legislating that anyone who gets their MSP paid for now, would get a raise to kind of match what the actual cost would be to them going forward. So those are what the parties are proposing. The Liberals haven't said what they're going to do yet, but I challenge the Liberals to think back to the early days of their tenure back in 2001 when they came to power. They believed that lower taxes sparked economic growth, and MSP is a drag on the economy. Whether it's your employer paying it, that's a payroll tax that's gone up year after year after year after year. Payroll tax like CPP and EI that slow job growth, make it more expensive to employ people. Or if you're paying it as a family, obviously that takes away income that you could be spending on other things, saving for kids to go to school or putting kids in hockey, things like that. So we do believe that there is savings to be had in getting rid of the MSP system, about $100 million a year. We believe that there are savings that would come if governments, i.e., government didn't have to pay for all their employees, for the teachers, for the nurses. If municipal workers didn't have to have it paid for, there'd be savings there. And if you roll that all in together and find a little bit of efficiency within the system, you might be able to cover off the whole thing.
Right. You wouldn't have the inefficiencies of a separate administration.
Well, exactly. And, we did some freedom of information requests, and it seems like it's about $77 million this year to collect that MSP. We think that's actually low. We think they're bearing costs in other staff line items. But that number's gone up 40% in the last 2 years. So it's getting more and more expensive to collect MSP. It's getting more and more expensive to track people down who haven't paid it. The government's forgiven, I don't have the number in front of me, but it's a significant amount of money in bad MSP debt. And the bottom line is the law says, if you're sick, it doesn't really matter if you paid your MSP. They can't turn you away at a Canadian hospital. They can go after you, make your life miserable afterwards, but they have to treat you. So the government really doesn't have a leg to stand on. They need to fix this system once and for all.
Would you still need to have a medical services card to prove that you're a BC resident or citizen and that you're deserving of health care? Yeah,
but only, the interesting thing here is there's never really been a challenge to this, like a constitutional challenge on that. It would be very interesting to see if that wound its way through court, what would happen. I've heard from lawyers on both sides of the issue kind of float ideas of how they might fight it. Look, you pay your taxes, pay your MSP. That's obviously what people should be doing. But let's fight to try to get this MSP put into the regular income tax system, find a way to make it cheaper for people, and find a way to spark some economic growth.
Right. Like you said, 77 million siphoned off to administer a system that nobody else in the country uses.
Yeah, exactly. And then you got to chase down people who haven't paid, the so-called, deadbeats, although I'd point out that, with the cost of living as high as it is, no wonder people can't afford to keep up with this stuff. We actually did another FOI this year looking at how many people are in arrears on their MSP payments. And, honestly, we were staggered by the number. It was, hang on, I'm just pulling up the exact number here. 800,000 MSP payments were at least 31 days late. So what that means is, people were getting behind on their bills, and 316,000 of those payments were more than 90 days past due, and that's almost $500 million in MSP debt that people hadn't been able to pay. So the one issue in this election that I think is going to frame the whole thing is cost of living. Which political party can come up with the best plan to help people with the cost of living, whether it's child care or hydro or ICBC premiums or MSP or affordable housing, all those different things. Who's got the best plan to make life more affordable for British Columbians? And I see MSP as a major component of that problem, and it needs to be a big focus in the election.
We'll have more with Jordan Bateman right after the break.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Jordan Bateman. Jordan, if they did decide to get rid of the medical services premium, it would be rolled into your provincial income tax, would it?
Yeah, I think probably. I mean, the MSP brings in about $2.5 billion a year. So that's one of the problems is the Liberals, by continuing to dig themselves deeper into this hole, have made it harder and harder to get rid of the system. Now, one of the fascinating comments that came out of the BC Liberal Convention was from Terry Lake, the outgoing health minister. And he actually kind of couched the idea of getting rid of MSP as a way to cut red tape. That would be the most ambitious, piece of red tape that government has cut in many years. I'll be honest with you, Jim, I don't really care why they do it. I don't care what makes them feel better about doing it. The truth is they need to do it. The Premier herself, in the lead up to last year's budget, cut some very strong interviews with Shane Woodford over at CKNW at the time, calling the system old and antiquated and out of date and obsolete. Really gave me a lot of hope that we were going to see substantial change in last year's budget. Turned out they just did some very minor tinkering, came out with a gimmick that, kids were now MSP free. Although, for my family, we have 3 kids. Somehow, despite them now being free, we're paying more every month in MSP than we did the year before. So, that gimmick kind of fell flat. I think the pressure is on these Liberals to finally correct this, even if it means rolling in a huge chunk of it into income tax and taking their lumps, for an income tax increase.
But of course, to income tax, you have to have income to tax. So if you're a poorer person, you wouldn't have to pay it anymore. Well,
exactly. And if you're an extremely wealthy person, you pay at a higher tax rate. So you'd be paying, chipping in a little bit more. That is what would happen. But there are other opportunities, right? I mean, what you would want to do is you'd want to make sure you're passing along the administrative savings to taxpayers. You'd want to make sure that you're passing along savings in labor contracts that governments negotiate with their staff, because if they get rid of this tax, they no longer have to pay that tax on their staff's behalf. And then, look at something like the carbon tax revenues, for example. A lot of the money for the carbon tax, which by law has to be revenue neutral, gets spent on things that don't help the average person who's paying the carbon tax. So, it goes to very boutique tax credits that the average Joe has no hope of ever kind of getting. What if you got rid of a couple of those tax credits too, and actually transferred that space into the MSP and helped bring down the cost even more? There's some real kind of opportunities there if only government's willing to take them.
Well, here's an issue I haven't heard brought up in BC, but in Saskatchewan, the government there buys all the prescription medication, and then when you get a prescription in Saskatchewan, all you pay is the dispensing fee, because they're buying the prescriptions in bulk. Of course, the cost for, say, that penicillin is down to pennies a pill instead of dollars a pill.
Yeah.
I mean, if the government's for the people and supposed to be trying to save the people money, and I've also heard, too, proposed by a UBC professor, why doesn't the Canadian government do that and distribute those drugs across Canada? Again, even further reducing the cost, because it's spread over 36 million people instead of individual provinces.
Yeah, I'm a little hesitant. When you're talking about a national pharmacare program, just keep in mind that the federal government is not exactly known for its efficiencies, right? There have been a lot of national programs that have ended up costing people a lot more money than was expected. So it's not these kind of magic bullet to solve everything, but, the government is trying to look at, I know the government's trying to look at different ways to bring down drug costs. The problem with talking about healthcare costs, Jim, is that there's this sense from people like me who are watchdogs in the media and even the Auditor General that, none of us are doctors or physicians, and so you're really hesitant to comment on, healthcare expenditures in case, what do we know about doing surgeries, or what do we know about, what a patient actually needs? But, I think we've got to get over that and really start pushing for more scrutiny, because healthcare is the number one expenditure by far in the provincial budget. It's up around 40% already, the budget. It's going to be well over 50% within a decade. And if we don't start finding ways to hunt up savings in that system, we're going to end up paying more and more and more in taxes to cover it.
Well, also, what about incentives for keeping yourself healthy? Because somebody I know very closely is participating in a health study where they exercise and they get bonus points and little gifts at the end of the month or at the end of the year for participating and reducing their weight and having a better heart rate and better blood pressure. right there, it doesn't cost a lot for those gifts, but it's going to save the healthcare system probably tens of thousands in the future.
Well, theoretically, although studies kind of go both ways as to whether or not those programs are sustainable. Often they only work as long as the gifts are going on, and then or the novelty wears off. So, and then how do you make sure that you're getting the people with the biggest risk factors involved? But look, health is an incredibly complicated issue. It's a reason why often provinces have 2 or 3 different kind of ministers dedicated to different parts of the healthcare system. I mean, we haven't even talked about mental health care. That's a huge cost driver as we go further and further down the road. We haven't talked about the aging demographics and what that means. We haven't talked about how the Trudeau Liberals, despite all their talk of wanting to spend more on healthcare, are actually sticking to the Harper plan of starting to cap healthcare funding transfers to the provinces. So lots of big issues there, and it's frankly why I think health is the most important portfolio, maybe even more so than finance. In government, and why you've got to find really smart, savvy people who can start running these healthcare ministries.
Another issue, it's kind of health related. Every year we go through the time change. Research shows every time you change the time, whether it's later or earlier in the day, there's more accidents. People are killed on the roads. Should we just stick to daylight savings time and stop changing it all the time? And should we have a referendum on it?
Well, I definitely think we should quit changing it, but I may be colored by the fact that I'm a parent, and have had young kids in the house here for the past decade and a bit. It's the worst for parents because you got your kids just never seem to be able to kind of let you have that extra hour. They get up at 5:30 instead of 6:30, and you're up with them. So I don't think you'd hear a lot of complaints from parents of small children about scrapping this. I don't know if you need a referendum. I mean, heck, just have a political party come in and say we're going to do it. I mean, that's just an administrative issue. The problem with referenda is there's only 2 ways of getting them. One is you have to go through the HST process, which is incredibly time consuming and virtually almost impossible in an issue like this, getting a certain percentage of people in every single riding across the province to sign a petition demanding a question. Or you get a governmental can put a question on the ballot if they choose. But usually they would do that, to try to deflect a tough decision, not something like this. I mean, is there anyone out there who's so passionate either way on this issue that, this is their vote motivator? I'm not sure. I'd just like to see the political parties, maybe just put in their platform and do it.
Well, in Saskatchewan, they don't change the time because the farmers say it's too upsetting for the cows. Maybe we need more cows in BC.
It's good to know that, the farmers and the parents of small children are having the same problem here. So, maybe that's the way to go is, parents of small kids unite. Let's, push the government to make this part of their agenda. Yeah,
the tykes and the cows, they want to be fed at the same time every day.
It's true. They become creatures of habit, and they get up at a certain time, and they don't care what the clock says. Their body wakes them up, and that's when they go. So, bad news for parents, but it certainly seems like one of these things that's run its course over the past century. I mean, all of the kind of reasons behind it, energy efficiency, that doesn't pan out. People said they used to do it because of farmers, while Saskatchewan has to do it because, of the cows. There just doesn't seem to be any compelling reason why we do this.
Well, I mean, it started by the Germans in World War
I. Look, old ideas that get entrenched are the problem and deserve to be looked at every once in a while. I don't even know, though, who would make that decision, right? Is that like can a province just say they're not going to do it? Isn't there a town on the east coast of BC that doesn't do the time change, so they flip back and forth between Mountain Time and Pacific Time, depending on what...
In the Peace River District, they're on Mountain Time.
Correct, yeah. So... yeah, it'd be interesting. I'd be curious to know. I wonder if Muriel Canseco over at Insights West has done polling on this or anything. My suspicion is that more people would rather get rid of this thing than keep it.
Well, like I said, keep the daylight savings time because why waste all that sunshine in the summer when the sun comes up at 4:00 in the morning? Why not save a little bit of that for the winter time when we need that light?
Sounds good to me.
Jordan, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
My guest has been Jordan Bateman, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Jordan, do you have a website?
Yeah, www.taxpayer.com. And if people go to the There's a section in there for British Columbia. You can see all the blog posts, op-eds, news releases, and other stuff that we do here in BC.
Thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
My guest has been Jordan Bateman. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. If you have questions for people like Jordan, you can email us to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.